This is another subject that I've thought about for years, most of my life, especially since 9/11. And although I've spoken about it in brief, it's not until now that I'm giving it a deeper thought and sharing it publicly. And this relates to the problem in Afghanistan beyond the New World Order. And the problem with, got to word this carefully because it's become a serious issue. The problem with the Afghan immigrants that have come to the United States and other places in the Western world. Now, I'm speaking, people can interpret things different ways. Many people believe that you are whatever your father is. I've always believed that you're both. Just DNA makes sense. You're getting the best of both genes. But, according to even a lot of Western cultures, you are what your father is. So, with my father being Afghan, and even though I'm an American, and I don't speak Farsi, and wasn't raised to be a Muslim, it's still my place to speak for the problem with Afghanistan and how this relates to many of the Afghan immigrants that have been able, gifted, blessed enough to be able to escape that country while they still have the time. And I think about my family, the other Ansarys, that I've never, ever been able to be close to. Initially it was a language barrier, and also I was raised by my mother my entire life. And so the exchanges in my childhood, my dad was the weekend dad, because they divorced when I was born. They were pleasant. I was just a child, and I saw the beauty that was in their culture and the pain that they were going through in the late 80s when, after a decade, the Russians had invaded. They invaded in 79, around 89. They withdrew. It was their Vietnam. But the suffering they went through in the 80s, worrying about their family. And most of you have heard about the war crimes that have been perpetrated against the Afghan people when the Russians were there. Women being raped, their babies thrown in the fire. Helicopters, like today's drones, bombing innocent civilians. History is repeating itself. So they have been through a lot, and there's a history of warfare that comes before that. But also a lot of stories people don't know about Afghan history, which is another very interesting subject. And I am not someone that is an expert on Afghanistan, because most of what I learned about not only in Afghanistan and also my own family, I've done by doing my own research. When I mean my own family, I mean the Ansary bloodline, which apparently is just about royalty when it comes to, ironically, the world of Islam. The Ansary tribe helped Muhammad, according to legend, escape. And I believe this was the Ansary clan tribe of Medina. I'm not exactly sure on all the details. And I've traced my last name back to some other ancient places as well. And I've come across a 10th century Sufi. And a lot of the Sufis were very metaphysical, very spiritual. This was not about dogma or being afraid of God, but direct connection with God, kind of like the Gnostics. Abdullah Ansary, spelled with an I instead of a Y. 10th century Afghanistan, in Herat, his mosque is still standing. So I've never really learned it all, and I know there's more, and perhaps even corruption. So there's the beauty and there's the things that I don't know that deal with the family's past. And what I've experienced leading up to 9/11 and after 9/11, they've always lived on the East Coast for the most part. And I've always been a Portlander, as most of you know. So I didn't even really grow up with a lot of Afghans in the Portland community, but in the 80s there was a few. And I lived with my dad's side of the family in 96, 97, when it was the first several years that I had to actually live with my dad. I had to move out and live with my dad, and those were that was a time period that I will discuss at a later point in time. Went through troubles in my life. Some of you know about that. A lot of, who am I? What am I doing in this world type of thing going on in my mind before 9/11. A lot of stuff in my consciousness was shifting. I got into some trouble, and I was in a stage of reality where I was hurting myself. Then 9/11 happened. And, here I am, half Afghan, half white, separated in a way by both families at that time, on my own, and in a way feeling alienated from both families, but on my mom's side, a much smaller family to feel alienated from or separate from because people lived in different places. Whereas my dad's side of the family, huge. The Ansarys are all over the place. They're just like, oh man. And I never built up a connection with them because, again, of the cultural differences and not growing up around them. And even after living with them in Virginia in the late 90s, communication didn't really maintain itself. It wasn't much of a bonding experience. Then 9/11 happened. And I'm waking up in a reality where that's where my dad was born. And they're basically marginalizing Afghans as terrorists. See, I knew something in my bones was coming to Afghanistan's future. Ironically, in the summer of 2001, it was on my mind. I didn't know what, but I remember wanting to see Afghanistan in the year 2000 or so, where I talked briefly with my dad while we were still talking. Another video I'll get deeper into depth into how we divorced each other. But where was I? I wanted to see Afghanistan before it was gone. I don't know why I felt that way, but I knew that, even though I'm not a Muslim, and even Afghanistan's not really Islam. What you hear about the Taliban, I mean, this is recent history. Even though you have the Islamic Empire, you had different spiritual beliefs, as most of you know. I mean, the Buddha in Afghanistan, different ethnic tribes. I wanted to see a place with such great beauty, and I had an interest in Buddhism growing up. And to see that temple, that statue rather, in Afghanistan, that who knows what, that's kind of interesting. I want to see it before it was gone. I didn't know it was going to get bombed soon. I just knew that, very strange what that country's been through. Then I embarked on the path that I did. And I started to see all this chaos and the casualties, the murders, the rapes, and now the drone attacks. And this horror grew inside of me and still exists to this day. I was looking around at other Afghans and even some that were journalists, and no one was speaking out about 9/11. The first couple years of my show, Outside the Box, I had a lot of different topics, but 9/11 was the driving one once it launched. It was what was the driving force to expose the 9/11 agenda. So I had David Ray Griffin on, Bob Bowman. I went down to Austin, Texas and met Alex Jones in 2005, my hero at the time, because of the great work he did at the time relating to 9/11, 9/11 Road to Tyranny. I remember seeing that late at night. And that's where, despite the manic behavior we see from him, sociopathic tendencies, the undeniable good that did come from the work he did after 9/11 to expose that criminal, dark, racist agenda. He doesn't get everything right, and I'm going to get off this topic real fast in this individual, but you cannot take that away from someone. Even if they weren't the first person to come up with the idea of 9/11, there were not enough people after 9/11 speaking loud and clear from the mountaintops. I saw that something triggered in me. I had a spiritual experience. I started to align with why I was born into the unique circumstances, that I had some sort of a purpose, that this New World Order concept, I understood it from another lifetime. Either I had served them or I was another one of their victims, but I understood the agenda and what it really feels like to be a slave and under tyranny and to go through an invasion. And so these things in my mind, computers, visions as a kid of computers reading people's brain waves. I thought about these things in my imagination as a kid in the future. It's just like it clicked why I was suffering the years prior. It was this feeling, this doom and gloom. Something's coming around the corner. It's not the end of the world, Y2K, but something. What is it? We haven't got there yet. Wait and see. And I saw. And I started to crawl myself out of the hole. The episodes began to manifest in 2005, shared them with the other Afghans, and faced a cold wall. And that pit in my stomach. That it is so painfully obvious what happened. And there are people from Afghanistan that are in my own family, if I can even call them that, like they've ever been family, like I've ever been family to them. It's just a situation of circumstance, not meaning to blame here, but they're still my family, and these are Afghans. These are real Afghans that they came here in the 80s and became American citizens, but they were born there. Aren't those their brothers and sisters? And I'm thinking, and run this through and by other people, and they're like, oh no, it's fear. They're afraid of what would happen to them if they were to speak out, or they're afraid of surveillance. We all know about the surveillance of the mosques. And I would consider them religious. I've never met a fanatical Afghani that ever talked about violence against the United States. What I did see, unfortunately, in the late 90s when I was staying with them, just this distaste for the dark aspects of Americanism. The smut on TV, that, certain things that even Christians would be concerned about. They saw these things and they would shut them off. Or turn the TV when there was an act of sex and there's children around, turn it off. That's not Islamic. Nothing about, jihad this or jihad that, just, fear God, just be good, and just a lot like a lot of other religions, because that's just what they're born into. And to see them have that attitude, and after 9/11, not even go, whoa, and having some go as far as to support Barack Obama, thinking he's going to bring change and peace to the Middle East. Seeing one of my relatives even post in a Facebook message or post on her, this is before I was befriended by a lot of Ansaries. I was befriended by nearly all of them on Facebook. It's like, this guy's fucking radical, they're thinking. This guy's talking about 9/11 was an inside job. No, man, Obama's gonna fix it. Obama's gonna fix it. Obama's gonna change. He's gonna bring happiness. He's gonna bring Coca-Cola. Stimulus package for all. And seeing a relative post, anybody who's not a friend of Obama is not a friend of mine. I'm like, what the fuck, man? You got all these people that have been victimized in Afghanistan, and you're supporting this would-be dictator that's expanding the New World Order's racist agenda. In a roundabout way, I get to the topic at hand, the Afghan problem and the Afghan immigrants that have come to this country where they have free speech. Look at me. I'm choosing to not be afraid. Oh, they can run a database. Oh, this is where Alex's genetic bloodline is. Oh my God. And am I gonna be a slave to that fear based on where my dad's from? That I'm not gonna speak out? So I went through that in my own spiritual experience, going, why? And I'm not trying to be this, I am the one! I am the Neo of the Ansary bloodline, channeling the Sufi Abdullah Ansary from the 10th century and all the other poets that were tapped into source creation. But I'm stopping, I'm going, what the fuck? There's a spiritual bloodline. There's a spiritual aspect to our bloodline that's come through every thousands of years with great people that have exposed great things and truths about the spiritual nature of the universe, perhaps more. And I'm in a generation of these people that have come over and without even admitting it, becoming more Americanized than they would have ever admitted they would have become